The wide tray gives you the opportunity to have a wider stance. The stock Superjet is only 13 inches wide. Every ski that's been made after the Superjet has been wider and wider and wider. So we just decided, why don't we make ours the max width? We went 21 inches wide and it is awesome. Today, we're talking about the tray. And that's not something you get in your lunch line.
No.
I'm talking about the part of the jet ski that you stand in. I stand goofy. Riley stands regular. Maybe you stand 2 feet in the back. Maybe you stand 2 feet in the front. You can stand however you want. It's a wide tray. The first step is to mark out the tray for all the cuts you're gonna make. As I start at the corner right here, and I get the cut started, and then once it's started, you can come down the edge here and get all the way down, and I can come back and cut the other way, all the way back up to the front. Now let's get to cutting. When you're cutting the exhaust side, you want to be sure that you don't cut too deep, otherwise you'll hit your exhaust pipe and that's not good. So you want to just make sure that you keep your cut shallow on this side. This pipe is sitting right here. So when you're cutting along this edge, you don't want to cut too deep or you'll cut into your exhaust pipe. At the front of the tray, I like to use something that's a little bit smaller, maybe one of these, maybe a die grinder. So you cut about 1 inch away from the edge. That way you have something to glass to at the end. And you just follow the ski, hold back about 2 inches so you don't hit the bulkhead. Right here, and around here, and straight down all the way to the floor. Now that you've made your cuts, go ahead and pry the sides off. It's probably gonna be a little tough because that foam's pretty strong. After that, start digging out the foam. If you come across any foam that's like really wet, you're gonna have a little bit more work to do. If your foam's wet, you're gonna wanna cut out the floor and dig out all the rest of that foam because that foam is gonna be really heavy and you wanna get all the water out. This ski, unfortunately, was completely soaked. It was awful, and it's smelly and nasty. So in that case, we had to cut the floor out, remove that so we can get access to all the foam, and you gotta dig all the foam out, and you're gonna have to redo it all. Not very fun. Also, if you do find your foam is waterlogged and you cut your floor out, save that piece. You can put it right back in and save you a ton of time and fiberglass. Now it's time to remove the exhaust. Drill out the rivets on the back flange, dig out as much of the foam as you can from around the exhaust tube, and then grab a dead blow hammer and a block of wood and pound it out from inside the engine bay. Once the exhaust is out, you can go ahead and dig out the rest of the foam so we can lower the exhaust pipe. If your foam's nice and dry, save yourself some work by just digging out the foam straight down the sides, and don't worry about any of the foam that's under the floor, it's still okay. Now that your exhaust tube is out, it's a good time to think about reinforcing the back part of your ski. We have a whole video about that. You should totally check it out, especially if you ride in the surf like we do. Now you're ready to fill the holes in the bulkhead. We just simply put a piece of tape on one side and mix up some thickened epoxy and fill the hole, maybe add a little piece of fiberglass just to make sure it stays in there. You also want to fill the 3 rivet holes on the back of the ski. At this point, we've got all the holes filled and we're ready to drill a new hole for the exhaust. We're gonna use a 2.5 inch hole saw to make a new hole in the bulkhead. The new hole is gonna be about 3.5 inches straight below the original hole. that's how it's done. It's a tight fit, but it should just slide right in. You'll notice that this flange isn't flat. It's actually got an angle to it. You're gonna slide it in and rotate it until it matches the back of the ski. It's not gonna be quite perfect, but you'll see what I mean. So as you rotate it, you're gonna find a sweet spot where it almost sits perfectly flat. This is gonna be the new angle that the exhaust is gonna sit, and we're just gonna need to mark these holes and drill new ones for the rivets. When you install the exhaust tube, you wanna make sure that you use a high quality marine sealant on both the bulkhead and on the stern of the hull. You don't want any leaks. We just did a lot of work, you don't wanna redo it. Now you can rivet in the exhaust. All right, now that we have the exhaust lowered, we're ready to do the foam. So what we're gonna do is pour new foam in there. We're also gonna throw in some dry used foam. That way we can just save cost because foam's pretty expensive. And then when it starts to expand, we're gonna lay this floor right down on top of it and make it nice and flat. For this project, we're using Sharkthane 2-part urethane expanding foam. All right, we got the foam in, we got the floor in. We thought we could hold the floor down, but the foam actually pushed it up enough that it kind of made it uneven. So next time we're gonna glass the floor in and then do the foam. Our next step is to cut the excess foam off and make the floor nice and level. Then we're gonna sand it and then glass the floor in and make it all sealed up. So we sanded the foam nice and flat, but that opens up the cells in the foam. So we're gonna use thickened epoxy to seal that up. After that, we'll follow with a piece of fiberglass and make it lay nice and flat, fit nicely in the corners, and then we'll do another piece of fiberglass over top of that for extra strength. So we're using 17-ounce biaxial fiberglass mat. It's gonna give us a lot of strength and thickness to this, so it'll be nice and strong. The trick is you wanna just make sure you get the corners to fit really well, and you can kind of like put a slit and fold them over top of each other. The goal is you want to seal the foam, so just be aware of that when you're laying the fiberglass. You want to make sure you get all the air out from under the fiberglass. The air is going to negatively affect the strength of your tray, so if you get that out, you'll be good. Just use a brush or your hand to just carefully push it out underneath. Now you're going to want to get a die grinder and a cutoff wheel and make a new reveal on the back edge of the ski. This is going to allow you to wrap your fiberglass over to it while you're glassing in the new sides. And then when you're finished, it's going to be a nice sharp edge for the turf to line up right up against. We made an 1 to 1.25 inch wide reveal. We used masking tape to get a nice straight line, and then we just freehanded it. When you're using a die grinder, you want to be really careful. You're making a visual edge, so it takes a steady hand. So go slow, just be really careful. After the cutoff wheel, come back with a sanding disc and just grind the rest down so it's about level. On the right, you can see we have one that's not cut yet, and over here is the one we just cut. About 1.25 inches. I made a little spacer block that's gonna take up some volume while we're foaming. We're gonna put it in a plastic bag so it doesn't stick to the foam, and then when the foam dries, we're just gonna pull it out, we'll shape the foam. The most important thing is don't get foam on your brand new RSKI tee. We mixed up 6 of part A and 6 of part B on the foam for a total of 12 ounces. And that worked out perfectly for this pour. We actually made up a little dam to keep it from going over the sides with just some tape. We're gonna let it harden and see what it looks like. All right, we got the foam in, and now it's time for the fun part. We're gonna use a drywall saw and 36 grit sandpaper and start shaping this thing. When I start working with the foam, I like to start with the saw, and I just try to keep nice straight cuts and make sure everything is kind of taking the rough shape on both sides the same. When you're doing the saw, it's really easy to cut too much, so sometimes you can just cut a little bit less than you think you need to cut and just come back and cut again. It's really easy to take too much foam, so just be really careful. After that, I switched to the sandpaper. I use 36 grit, and it again is really easy to shape the foam. You don't have to apply any pressure. You just literally just drag the sandpaper across the foam and it comes right off really easy. Start to finish for shaping the tray, it probably only took me 15 or 20 minutes. If you've made it this far, good job, you're almost done. Last step is we're gonna glass it all closed. We're just gonna cut rectangular strips of fiberglass. For this, we're gonna use a 6-ounce fiberglass weave. It's really easy to work with. You wanna make sure that you paint the entire area that you wanna apply your fiberglass to with epoxy. So that's the fiberglass of the Jetski hull and the new foam that you just sanded. Lay your new fiberglass pieces on dry. They'll soak up the epoxy that you just painted on. Your fiberglass pieces should be big enough to go from one part of the hole all the way to the other part of the hole, covering and sealing the foam. And we're just gonna layer them on across everything, 1 layer, 2 layers, probably 3 layers total. That's gonna give us a nice finish, allowing the fiberglass to flex over all the corners, but it's also layering it up that much is gonna give us good strength. The glass is done. We're just waiting for it to dry. I'm so stoked. This ski is gonna handle so good with the wide tray. I wanna know what you guys think about it. Would you do this to your ski? It's a lot of work, but it's pretty sick. Hit us up in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps us out a ton. All right, we'll see you in the next video. And check out our swag, it's sick.